Beira, Queen of Winter. Dark Beira was the mother of all gods and goddesses in Scotland. She was of great height and very old, and everyone feared her. When roused to anger, she was as fierce as the biting north wind and harsh as the tempest-stricken sea. Each winter she reigned as queen of the 4 red divisions of the world, and none disputed her sway. But when the sweet spring season drew nigh, her subjects began to rebel against her, and to long for the coming of the summer king Angus of the White Steed, and Bride, his beautiful queen, who were loved by all, for they were bringers of plenty and bright, happy days. It enraged Beira greatly to find her power passing away, and she tried her utmost to prolong the winter season by raising spring storms and sending blighting frost to kill early flowers and keep the grass from growing. Beira lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. The reason she did not die of old age was because, at the beginning of every spring, she drank the magic waters of the Well of Youth, which bubbles up inside the green island of the West. This was a floating island, where summer was the only season, and trees were always bright with blossom and laden with fruit. It drifted about on the silver tides of the blue Atlantic, and sometimes appeared off the western coast of Ireland, and sometimes close to the Hebrides. Many bold mariners have steered their galleys up and down the ocean, searching for the green island in vain. On a calm morning they might sail past its shores and yet never know as it was near at hand, for oft-times it lay hidden in twinkling mist. Men have caught glimpses of it from the shore, but while they gazed on its beauties with eyes of wonder, it vanished suddenly from sight by sinking beneath the waves like the setting sun. Beira, however, always knew where to find the green island when the time came for her to visit it. The waters of the Well of Youth are most potent when the days begin to grow longer, and most potent as all on the first lengthening days of spring. Beira always visited the island on the night before the first lengthening day, that is, on the last night of her reign as Queen of Winter. All alone in the darkness, she sat beside the Well of Youth, waiting for the dawn. When the first faint beam of light appeared in the eastern sky, she drank the water as it bubbled fresh from the crevice in the rock. It was necessary that she should drink this magic water before any bird visited the well and before any dog barked. If a bird drank first or a dog barked before she began to drink, dark old Beira would crumble into dust. As soon as Beira tasted the magic water, in silence and alone, she began to grow young again. She left the island and, returning to Scotland, fell into a magic sleep. When, at length, she awoke in bright sunshine, she rose up as a beautiful girl with long yellow hair as buds of broom, cheeks red as ribbon berries, and blue eyes that sparkled like the summer sea in sunshine. Then she went to and fro through Scotland, clad in a robe of green and crowned with a chaplet of bright flowers of many hues. No fairer goddess was to be found in all the land, save Bride, the peerless queen of summer. As each month went past, however, Beira aged quickly. She reached full womanhood in the midsummer, and when autumn came on, her eyebrows wrinkled and beauty began to fade. When the season of winter returned once again, she became an old and withering hag, and began to reign as the fierce Queen Beira. Often, on stormy nights in early winter, she wandered about singing this sorrowful song. O life that ebbs like the sea, I am weary and old, I am weary and old. Oh, how happy can I be, all alone in the dark and in the cold. I am the old Beira again, my mantle no longer is green. I think of my beauty with pain, and the days when another was queen. My arms are withered and thin, my hair once golden is grey. 'Tis winter, my reign doth begin, youth's summer has faded away. Youth, summer, and autumn have fled, I am weary and old, I am weary and old. Every flower must fade and fall dead. when the winds blow cold. When the winds blow cold. The aged Beira was fearsome to look upon. She only had one eye, but in the sight of it was keen and sharp as ice, and swift as a mackerel of the ocean. Her complexion was a dull, dark blue, and this is how she sung about it. Why is my face so dark, so dark, so dark, oh ho, so dark, oh he? Out in all weathers I wander alone, in the mire and the cold, ah, me. Her teeth were red as rust, and her locks, which lay heavily on her shoulders, were as white as an aspen covered with hoar frost. On her head she wore a spotted cap. All her clothing was grey, and she was never seen without her great dun-coloured shawl, which was drawn closely around her shoulders. It is told that in the days when the world was young, Beira saw land where there is now water, and water where there is now land. Once, a wizard spoke to her, and said, "Tell me your age, O sharp old woman." Beira answered, "I have long ceased to count the years, but I shall tell you what I have seen. Yonder is the seal-haunted rock of Skerryvore in the midst of the sea. I remember when it was a mountain surrounded by fields. I saw the fields ploughed, and the barley that grew upon them was sharp and jutty. Yonder is a loch. I remember when it was a small round well. In those days I was a fair young girl, and now I am very old and frail and dark and miserable." It is told also that Beira let loose many rivers and formed many lochs, sometimes willingly and sometimes against her will, and that she also shaped many bens and glens. All the hills in Rossshire are said to have been made by Beira. There was once a well on Ben Cruachan in Argyll from which Beira drew water daily. Each morning at sunrise she lifted off the slab that covered it, and each evening at sunset she laid it over the well again. It happened that one evening she forgot to cover the well. Then the proper order of things was disturbed. As soon as the sun went down, the water rose in a great volume and streamed down the mountainside, roaring like a tempest-swollen sea. When day dawned, Beira found that the valley beneath was filled with water. It was in this way that Loch Awe became to be. Beira had another well in Inverness-shire, which had to be kept covered in like manner from sunset till sunrise. One of her maids, whose name was Nessa, had charge of the well. It happened that one evening the maid was late in going to the well to cover it. When she drew near, she beheld the water flowing so fast from it that she turned away and ran for her life. Beira watched her from the top of Ben Nevis, which was her mountain throne, and cried, "You have neglected your duty. Now you will run forever and never leave the water." The maiden was at once changed into a river, and the loch and the river which runs from it towards the sea were named after her. That is why the loch is called Loch Ness, and the river, River Ness. Once a year, when the night on which she was transformed comes round, Nessa rises out of the river in her girl form and sings a sad, sweet song in the pale moonlight. It is said that her voice is clearer and more beautiful than of any bird, and her music more melodious than the golden harps and silvern pipes of fairyland. In the days when rivers broke loose and lochs were made, Beira set herself to build the mountains of Scotland. When at work, she carried on her back a great creel filled with rocks and earth. Sometimes as she leapt from hill to hill, her creel tilted sideways, and rocks and earth fell from it into the lochs and formed islands. Many islands are spoken of as spillings from the great creel of the big old woman. Beira had 8 hags who were her servants. They also carried creels, and one after the other they emptied out their creels until a mountain was piled up high to the clouds. One of the reasons why Beira made the mountains was to use them as stepping stones. Another was to provide houses for her giant sons. Many of her sons were quite quarrelsome. They fought continually against one another, and to punish those of them who disobeyed her, Beira shut the offenders up in the mountain houses, and from these they could not escape without her permission. But this did not keep them from fighting. Every morning they climbed to the tops of their mountain houses and threw great boulders at one another. That is why so many big grey boulders now lie on the steep slopes and are scattered throughout valleys. Other giant sons of Beira dwelt in deep caves. Some were horned like deer, and others had many heads. So strong were they that they could pick up cattle and, throwing them over their shoulders, carry them away to roast them for their meals. Each giant son of Beira was called a Fuar. It was Beira who built Wee-Haggis. She found it a hard task, for she had to do all of the work alone, her hag's servants being busy elsewhere. One day, when she had grown very weary, she stumbled and upset her creel, as all of the rocks and earth it contained fell out in a heap and formed the mountain which is called Little Wee-Haggis. The only tool that Beira had used was a magic hammer. When she struck it lightly on the ground, the soil became as hard as iron, and when she struck it heavily on the ground, a valley was formed. After she had built up a mountain, she gave it its special form by splintering the rocks with her hammer. As she had made all the hills of the same shape, she would not have been able to recognize one from the other. After the mountains were all formed, Beira took great delight in wandering between and over them. She was always followed by wild animals. The foxes barked with delight when they beheld her, the wolves howled to greet her, and eagles shrieked with joy in midair. Beira had great herds and flocks to which she gave her protection. Nimble-footed deer, high-horned cattle, shaggy grey goats, black swine, and sheep that had snow-white fleeces. She charged her deer against the huntsmen, and when she visited the deer forest, she helped them to escape from the hunters. During early winter, she milked the hinds of the tops of mountains, but when the winds rose so high that the froth was blown from the milking pails, she drove the hinds down to the valleys. The froth was frozen on the crest of the high hills and lay there snow-white and beautiful. When the winter torrents began to pour down the mountainsides, leaping from edge to edge, the people said, "Beira is milking her shaggy goats, and streams of milk are pouring down over the high rocks." Beira washed her great shawl in the sea, for there was no lake big enough for the purpose. The part she chose for her washing is the strait between the western islands of Jura and Scarba. Beira's washing pot is the whirlpool, there called Corrie Brecon. It was so named because the son of a Scottish king named Brecon was drowned in it, his boat having been upset by the waves raised by Beira. 3 days before the Queen of Winter began her work, her hag servants made ready the water for her, and the Corrie could then be heard snorting and fuming for 20 miles round. On the 4th day, Beira threw her shawl into the whirlpool and tramped it with her feet until the edge of the Corrie overflowed with foam. When she had finished her washing, she laid her shawl on the mountains to dry, and as soon as she lifted it up, all the mountains of Scotland were white with snow to signify that the great Queen had begun her reign.